What if the very person who made Fleetwood Mac the biggest band on Earth was also the one who secretly destroyed it from the inside? Mick Fleetwood finally breaks his silence on the toxic shadow cast by Stevie Nicks, and why the music we love was actually a countdown to their destruction. We look at the legacy of this band through a lens of glittering nostalgia, remembering the flowing shawls, the mystical tambourines, and the flawless harmonies that defined an entire generation of classic rock. But beneath the ethereal surface of the Welsh witch persona lies a story of absolute devastation, staggering betrayal, and a chaotic gravitational pull that tore apart the very foundation of the group. To truly understand the catastrophe that unfolded, you have to rewind to the days before the world had ever heard of the white-winged dove. In late 1974, Fleetwood Mac was a band on the brink of total irrelevance. They had suffered through a revolving door of erratic guitarists, exhausting legal battles over fake touring bands, and the agonizing struggle to find a coherent musical identity. Mick Fleetwood was desperate. He was a drummer and a manager grasping at straws, desperately trying to keep a sinking ship afloat. When he walked into Sound City Studios in Los Angeles and heard a track from a struggling duo named Buckingham Nicks, he thought he was just hiring a hotshot young guitarist named Lindsey Buckingham. But Lindsey came with a strict package deal, a fiery, fiercely independent songwriter named Stevie Nicks. Mick had absolutely no idea that by inviting this duo into the fold, he was signing a Faustian bargain. In an instant, the band went from playing mid-level blues to capturing the absolute zeitgeist of global superstardom. Stevie Nicks was the ultimate catalyst. Her songwriting was a revelation, tapping into an emotional rawness that struck a profound chord with millions of listeners. The self-titled 1975 album exploded, and then came Rumours, a record that sold over 40 million copies and became the definitive soundtrack of the decade. But that monumental, unprecedented success came with an agonizingly high price tag. The more Stevie shone, the deeper the shadows became for everyone else in her orbit. The paradox of Stevie Nicks is the central tragedy of Fleetwood Mac. She was the golden goose, the undisputed icon whose face moved millions of magazines and albums, yet she was also the eye of a relentless hurricane that ravaged the band's internal harmony. Her relationship with Lindsey Buckingham, famously disintegrating right as the band hit its absolute zenith, became the bleeding heart of their music. They were airing their darkest, most vindictive grievances on tape, forcing each other to sing harmonies on songs designed to inflict maximum emotional pain. Imagine the psychological torture of standing on a stage, night after night in front of 80,000 screaming fans, playing guitar on a song where your ex-lover is publicly calling you out for your failures. But the friction did not stop with Lindsey. Stevie's skyrocketing fame created an unbearable imbalance of power within the group. In the beginning, Fleetwood Mac was a democracy, a tight-knit unit of musicians working toward a common goal. But as the 70s wore on and the cocaine began to flow like a blizzard, the democracy dissolved into an absolute monarchy. Stevie's mystical persona completely transcended the band. She became a cultural deity. Fans were not just showing up to see Fleetwood Mac, they were showing up to worship at the altar of Stevie Nicks. This bred an insidious, quiet resentment among the other members, particularly from those who had been slogging it out in the trenches since the 1960s. Mick Fleetwood watched as the band he had bled for transformed into a backing track for its lead singer. And in a desperate bid to maintain control, or perhaps out of sheer, unadulterated madness, Mick did the one thing that guaranteed the band's total psychological collapse. But just when you think you know the whole story of the cocaine-fueled 70s and the broken hearts, there is a much darker, hidden layer that Mick Fleetwood kept buried for decades. A catastrophic turning point that permanently shattered the band's psychological core. Stick around, because the real reason Fleetwood Mac could never truly heal has nothing to do with Lindsey Buckingham's legendary jealousy, and everything to do with an incredibly reckless, secret betrayal that happened in the dark corners of the Tusk tour, an event so destructive it almost erased their legacy entirely. If you think the Rumours era was toxic, what happened next will change how you listen to this band forever. During the sprawling, infinitely chaotic global tour for their experimental album Tusk, Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks embarked on a deeply clandestine, highly destructive affair. Mick was married to Jenny Boyd, making him a brother-in-law to George Harrison and Eric Clapton by proxy. He had a family. Stevie was his best friend's former soulmate. But the intense isolation of extreme fame and the boundless access to hard drugs stripped away every boundary of human decency. This affair was not just a romantic indiscretion. It was a devastating detonation of the band's already fragile trust. Mick has since confessed that this relationship was the single greatest mistake of his life, a completely reckless indulgence that created a permanent fracture within the band's hierarchy. How could Lindsey Buckingham ever trust Mick, the father figure and manager of the band, after he slept with the woman who broke his heart? How could Christine McVie, the steady, reliable anchor of the group, maintain any respect for the leadership when the leader was entirely compromised? The affair fizzled out as quickly as it ignited, leaving behind a toxic residue that coated every single interaction for the next 4 decades. Furthermore, Stevie's solo career exploded with the release of Belladonna in 1981. Suddenly, she did not need Fleetwood Mac at all. The power dynamic inverted completely. Mick found himself in the humiliating position of having to beg Stevie to return for album cycles, scheduling the entire existence of Fleetwood Mac around her highly lucrative solo tour. Mick had gone bankrupt despite generating hundreds of millions of dollars, losing his fortune to terrible real estate deals in Australia and an astronomical drug habit. He needed Fleetwood Mac to survive, but Fleetwood Mac could only survive if Stevie deigned to participate. She held the absolute keys to his financial ruin or salvation. She was the architect of their greatest triumphs and the executioner holding the axe over their collective necks. Every time they gathered in a studio, it was exclusively on her terms. The resentment festered like an untreated wound. You have to look at the sheer logistics of trying to manage a band under these impossible conditions. Producing an album with Fleetwood Mac in the 1980s became an exercise in hostage negotiation. The recording sessions for Mirage and later Tango in the Night were absolute masterclasses in dysfunction. Stevie was battling a severe addiction to cocaine, which eventually transitioned into an even more debilitating addiction to Klonopin, a tranquilizer that robbed her of her creative spark and physical energy. Her physical and emotional absence from the studio meant that Lindsey Buckingham was left to meticulously craft the albums alone, agonizing over every sonic detail, essentially producing pristine backing tracks for a phantom lead singer. When Stevie did show up, she was often isolated, recording her vocals in completely different studios, entirely disconnected from the band's synergy. She would fly in, lay down a vocal track with a glass of brandy, and leave. The creative friction that had once produced the undeniable magic of Rumours had devolved into cold, mechanical isolation. Mick Fleetwood, trying to be the ultimate diplomat, was reduced to a glorified babysitter, running endless damage control between warring factions of wildly erratic multimillionaires. The sheer narcissism of fame had entirely eroded the communal spirit of a rock and roll band. This is the ultimate paradox of their creative output. The very chaos that made their music so incredibly compelling, the raw, unfiltered truth of their dysfunctional relationships, was the exact same poison that made it impossible for them to function as human beings. They were selling millions of records by bleeding out of their pores for the public's entertainment, but behind the scenes, there was nothing left to give. Every hit song was another nail in the coffin of their sanity. They had successfully gamified their own trauma, and Stevie was the undisputed, untouchable champion of the game. The breaking points are deeply documented in the annals of music history, but they take on a terrifying new context when viewed through this lens of systemic destruction. Take the infamous physical altercation between Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks in 1987, just before Lindsey quit the band for the first time. The tensions had boiled over into outright violence in a living room, a sickening manifestation of years of unspoken rage and trapped resentment. Lindsey could not bear to be the architect of Stevie's musical platform anymore, not when she was entirely absent from the heavy lifting of the studio process, while reaping the lion's share of the glory. Even decades later, during the euphoric height of their 1997 reunion tour, the dance, the smiles on stage masked a deeply entrenched Cold War reality. They could flawlessly perform the hits, they could smile for the MTV cameras, but the fundamental trust was entirely gone. And the final, fatal blow came in 2018, when Stevie Nicks issued an absolute, non-negotiable ultimatum to Mick Fleetwood and the rest of the band. Either Lindsey Buckingham goes, or I go. She refused to share a stage with him ever again, citing a smirk he allegedly gave during her acceptance speech at a Musey Cares event. Mick, forever the pragmatist, forever terrified of losing the golden goose that funded his lifestyle, chose Stevie. He publicly fired Lindsey Buckingham, the musical genius who had literally architected their signature sound, to appease the woman who had held the band emotionally hostage for over 40 years. It was the ultimate betrayal, the final severing of the Buckingham-Nicks dynamic that had built the empire in the first place. Mick Fleetwood's quiet confessions over the years reveal a deeply haunted man. He knows exactly what it cost to make Fleetwood Mac the biggest band on Earth. He willingly invited a beautifully destructive force into his home, and he spent the rest of his life watching it burn the house down from the inside out. Stevie Nicks did not intentionally set out to destroy Fleetwood Mac, but the overwhelming gravity of her star power, combined with the incredibly poor, selfish decisions made by those around her, meant that survival was mathematically impossible. They traded their humanity for immortality. And as we listen to those timeless records today, we are literally listening to the sound of a family tearing itself apart for our entertainment. But Fleetwood Mac is not the only band to sacrifice their soul for global domination. If you want to know the horrifying truth behind the toxic egos that permanently shattered the Eagles, and why Don Henley ruled with a terrifying iron fist, you need to click and watch the next video right now.